So I wanted to have a conversation about Avigilon Analytic Events. So Avigilon Analytic Events are available in any analytic camera, H4A, H5A, H3A, if you're going back, and then you also have the AI appliances and the ES recorders, I should say, with analytics. So what do these different events mean? I hear this a lot, and I kind of wanted to do a quick video just kind of explaining when to use these and what they mean here. So you got objects in an area, object loitering, objects crossing a beam, object appears or enters area, object not present in area, objects enter area, objects leave area, object stops in area, and direction violated. So there are your options for triggering rules and alarms in your ACC client here. So you can see I already had this set up and tooled up, and I actually had the green box, a green area or carpet, whatever you want to call it, confined to this particular area. But when you create a new one, it's going to look like this to start. So I just reset what I had, and then you basically come in here and you shrink it down to the area that you're looking for. So I'll just reset this up real quick, show you how quick it happens. Okay. So I'm going to dive into the help file now and kind of review each one of these and kind of tell you, when to use them, why to use them. I'm going to cancel out of that. And okay, go back into my trusty help file. And I don't want to dive too far into other information about analytic events, but and I'll review this at a later time, but you can talk about the sensitivity, number of objects, threshold time, timeout, prohibitive direction. But sensitivity, I'll just talk about this: the likeness of an object to trigger an event. The greater the sensitivity, the more likely an event will be triggered for objects detected with low confidence. So, if you're getting false alarms coming from your events, the higher the sensitivity, the more likely it's going to trigger on lower confidence devices. Okay. I'll dive more into that in another video. I just really wanted to kind of focus on the analytic events in this video right here. So right up here, this is kind of important to understand. So the region of interest is like a rug or a tripwire. So events are only triggered if the bottom center of the detected object's bounding box is in the region of interest or crosses the beam. So bottom center. So what does bottom center look like? So if I zoom in here, bottom center, we got a false positive here. I have not finished teach by example on this camera, but it kind of gives you that part would have to cross the beam or go into the box to trigger that. So very important when you're setting up your coverage area. So objects in an area. So the event is triggered when the selected number of objects are present in the region of interest for longer than the threshold time. The object can appear from within the region of interest or enter from outside. Only one event is activated when the specified number of objects are detected in the area. Additional objects in the area will not trigger additional events. So basically, this is the one you're going to use for, somebody comes on a property, vehicle goes in an area it's not supposed to. This is the one you're going to use most of the time. In fact, the top three: objects in an area, object loitering, object crosses the beam. 95% of the time you're going to be using one of these three events to trigger a rule or an alarm, or both. So let's dive back into the camera here. Setup, device setup, analytic events, edit. So objects in an area. So object type, person or vehicle. So you can have both or one or the other. Sensitivity, we talked about that. So if I move that more to the right, it's going to be more sensitive to lower thresholds. So you see, we got two falsely classified objects here. One of them's 5, the other one's 7. So we'll deal with that with teach by example. So sensitivity we talked about. Number of objects, so pretty self-explanatory. How many objects have to be in this particular area? You can start with 1, maybe you want 2, maybe you want 4. So 4 objects would have to be in that green area for 2 seconds. Okay, you can also up this. I don't know how high it goes, but we'll click the button and just see. 30 seconds. Let's see if this goes all the way up to 60 seconds. And looks like 59 seconds is the max. And let's try 20. Wow, we can do 20 devices, 40 devices, 50. Oh, looks like 20 devices is the max. 20. Okay, so maximum number of objects 20, maximum threshold time 59 seconds. And the timeout is 5 minutes. So basically, if an object is in there for more than 5 minutes, it's going to kill it and start that event all over again. Okay, cancel out of that. Go back in the help file. Object loitering. So the event is triggered for each object that stays within the region of interest longer than the threshold time. Each object triggers a separate event. The event resets when the object leaves the region of interest or the event times out. Okay, what does that mean? Device setup, event. Okay, objects loitering. So say we take this green box over here and we wanted to get a notification, if somebody was, hanging out around this tree for whatever reason, for whatever, we could set this up. So it's a person or a vehicle. So your sensitivity, number of object is locked to 1. Threshold time default is 30 seconds. I think this goes up to 30 minutes. Trying to go up 31. Yep, it's going to take you down to 30. So looks like your threshold time is 30 minutes and your timeout and default is 5 minutes. So basically what this rule would say right here, if a person or a vehicle went into this area and stayed there for 30 minutes, it would then trigger the event. Okay. And if more objects entered here, each one would track and you would get a notification if they were there for 30 minutes or something a little bit more realistic is probably, 30 seconds. Okay, we'll go back to my help file. Object crosses beam, or objects crosses beam, I should say. I have to be careful understanding objects versus objects down here. We get a little more detailed. So object crosses beam. Again, this one's pretty self-explanatory here. The event is triggered when the specified number of objects have crossed the beam in the specified direction within the threshold time. If the number of objects is 1, the event is triggered after the threshold time elapses. Let's see. To change the direction, you have the way to basically reverse the direction. You can also make it bidirectional. So how does this work? Right click, set up, analytic events, edit. So now I'm going to select object crosses a beam. So up here, talked about, you can do bidirectional or you can flip the direction. And again, you just kind of grab it. And so I could set it here, I get a notification, anytime a vehicle crosses that beam. And you can notice when you crank up the number of objects, now it's going to require 2 objects to cross that within 1 second. So I don't know what the max is with this. Let's see. Looks like 20. Looks like 20 is the max, and I'm guessing the threshold time is probably 15 minutes. So there we go. So if 20 objects cross that beam within 15 minutes, that will trigger the event. And you also have a timeout of 5 minutes by default. Okay. Kill that. Now, these get a little more interesting. So got to pay attention to the verbiage and understand the differences between the first 3 and the rest of the event. So the next one, object appears or enters area. So objects in an area, object appears or enters an area. So the event is triggered once an object, the event is triggered once for each object that is present in the region of interest for longer than the threshold time. The object can appear from within the region of interest or enter from outside the region of interest. I'll go over that as soon as I go back into the camera. This video analytic event may cause many alarms. For example, if 20 objects are detected within the region of interest, 20 events will be triggered, one for each object. This is, in my mind, this is more of a counting analytic. If you want to, have a count of how many objects are in a particular area. So go in here. So object appears or enters area. So again, I have people or vehicles or both. Sensitivity, number of object is locked to 1. Threshold time is, you can set it up here. So, basically when the first object enters here and stays there for more than 2 seconds, bang, we're getting an alarm. Second object enters and the first object is still in here, boom, we're going to get another alarm. Also wanted to talk about, object appears from inside or enters. So what does that mean? So imagine I set up an event, here on the front of this building, okay? And somebody came from inside the building and came out here. So basically what they're saying is, object appears from inside the carpet. So if somebody leaves the building, comes through the door, they are appearing inside the green. They're not walking by and walking in the building. So again, we can get a little bit more granular down here as we move down this list, but you can differentiate between, somebody walking from inside or coming from inside the building. Okay, we're going to cancel that. Cancel that. Go back to help. So let's go down here. So we have object not present in area. This is I think pretty self-explanatory. The event is triggered when no objects are present in the region of interest for longer than the threshold time. So, this is one you would use when you, say a person, security guard, whoever is supposed to be walking around in this area and they're always supposed to be there. And you want to get a notification if that person or vehicle is not in that particular area. So what does it look like? I go down here, object not present in an area. So again, person or vehicle or both, sensitivity, number of objects, threshold time. So it looks like you can really crank this one up here. So number of objects, 20. So you're limited to 20. Oh, you can do 1 hour. So you can basically do 1 hour and you go down to minutes and seconds. So if 20 people had to be in this area for an hour, before that would trigger somebody not being in there, basically this is your threshold that you would use. But if you wanted, somebody, if you have one person or one vehicle and they came out of that box for more than 1 second, the way this is set up right now, that would trigger an event. And also your timeout is default 5 minutes. Let's see. Okay. The last 4. Objects enter area. The event is activated when the first object enters the region of interest and then is triggered if the specified number of objects also enter the region of interest within the threshold time. If the number of objects is 1, the event is triggered after the threshold time elapses. The region of interest must be smaller than the camera field of view to detect the object before it enters the region of interest. Objects that appear from within the region of interest will not be triggered event. So, important right there. Objects that appear from within the region of interest will not trigger the event. Only one event is activated when the specified number of objects are detected in the area. Additional objects in the area will not trigger events. Okay, so let's go back to the setup here. Analytic events, edit. So object enters area. So basically, if I go back to my setup here and I set this up in front of these doors, and somebody left the building here, that would not trigger this event. because they would be coming from inside of the rug. Whereas if somebody walked into the building, now they entered from outside of the carpet, and that would trigger an event. So, basically you have number of objects and you have your threshold time. Same as the other. I'm assuming this one is probably also 20. Yep. And then I'm assuming this is going to be 30 minutes. No, we're at 15 minutes right there. So maximum of objects, threshold time, 15. Okay. I cancel out of that. So objects leave area. So the event is activated when the first object leaves the region of interest and then is triggered if the specified number of objects also leave the region of interest within the threshold time. If the number of objects is 1, the event is triggered after the threshold time elapses. The region of interest must be smaller than the field of view of the camera. So again, same thing. So this is not going to trigger an event the way I had it set up over here. If somebody comes out of the building, out of these doors right here, it is not going to trigger that event. It will trigger it if those objects leave this box and go this direction, but if they would come from inside and leave, that is not going to work. Same thing, number of objects and your threshold time here. Number of objects, we think we can bump this up to 20. Yep, and threshold time, 2 seconds. So if an object leaves that area, 20 objects for 2 seconds, it's going to trigger that event. You can also do person or vehicle or both. Cancel. Oops, I go up to help here. So now we have object stops in area. So this is kind of similar to object loitering. Okay. Object stops in area. The event is triggered if a classified object is detected moving within the region of interest, then stops moving for longer than the threshold time. One event is activated for each object that stops. An object can only be tracked for up to 15 minutes. So basically this is saying the event is triggered if a classified object is detected moving within the region of interest, then stops. So again, go to setup, analytic events, edit, come here. So the object would have to be detected from inside the box here. And basically the threshold time is that the object would stop for 10 seconds and then it would trigger the event. Again, you have people or vehicles or both. Sensitivity, your number of object is 1. So if one object stops inside this area for more than 10 seconds, you'll get your event. Cancel out of that. And the final one, direction violated. The event is triggered for each object that moves within 22 degrees of the prohibited direction for longer than the threshold time. One event is activated for each classified object that moves in the prohibitive direction. Okay. I like just creating a whole bunch of tabs up here. Could have just clicked on the setup and went back in. Okay, direction violated. So this one's a little unique. So this one's a little different. So we're going to reset the inclusion area. So just going to make it nice and big. So basically direction violated. If everything's supposed to be going left to right and something goes right to left for more than 2 seconds, you're going to get an event. Okay, now you also have this direction arrow that you can change pretty much any direction you want. And you also have the ability to set a bounding box however you see fit. So, say we want to get a notification, if the car's coming down this road, I wouldn't say cars going down this road. Say somebody decided to make a left-hand turn on this one-way street. We could use that to set up a notification. You also have people or vehicles. Number of objects is lost for locked at 1, and your threshold time is, let's see, 30 seconds, 15 seconds. Okay. Cancel. Let's go back to the help file here. So in closing, it's very important to pay attention to the description for each one of these. There's some very little important details that you have to follow. Otherwise, you're going to get the results that you're not expecting. So once again, thank you very much for listening. Look forward to doing this again soon.